An Amish farmer in Holmes County, Ohio builds a fire the size of a dinner plate. It burns 10 hours straight, no tending, no electricity, same wood you split last weekend. Now picture your own backyard fire pit. You stack an armload of split oak, you light it, and 90 minutes later the wood is gone. By midnight the ground around it reads 38 degrees on the infrared thermometer, cold. Same wood, same weather, twice the heat, half the fuel. That is not a trick. That is a method written in a German farmhouse manual dated 1742. 5 generations of one Lancaster County family used it. The mainstream camping books never mentioned it. By the end of this video, I will show you the one modification written in German on the back pages of that 1742 manual that lets a single load of wood burn for 10 hours with nobody watching it. The Amish call it the nightcap log. Almost no English homeowner has ever heard of it. The first time I saw it work, I was standing in a backyard outside Millersburg in late October, hands shoved in my coat pockets, watching a man named Daniel feed his fire one stick at a time. I had brought a whole armload of split oak, the way I always did at home. He looked at it, smiled, and told me I would not need most of it. He was right. 3 small pieces of wood lasted longer than my entire pile would have in a regular pit. I went home that night and threw out everything I thought I knew about building a fire. You do not need new land. You do not need new equipment. You can do this in the backyard you already own this weekend with the wood you already split. Now let me tell you what I saw Daniel do, because it goes against everything you have ever been told about building a fire. He did not stack the wood in a tall teepee. He did not pile it in a log cabin square the way the Boy Scouts teach. He dug a hole. A simple hole about a foot wide and a foot deep, with a second, smaller hole next to it connected by a tunnel underneath. He placed his wood down inside the main hole, lit it from the top, and stepped back. The flames pulled themselves down into the pit instead of leaping up into the wind. The smoke practically vanished. And the heat, instead of rising straight up into the cold sky and disappearing, came rolling out of the ground like a furnace vent. I held my hand a foot above that pit and felt more warmth than I ever felt standing 3 feet away from my old above-ground fire ring at home. He called it the underground draft method. The English world calls it a Dakota fire hole. The Amish have been using a version of it on farms across Pennsylvania and Ohio since at least the early 1800s, and the principle behind it is older than the United States itself. The reason it works is something called passive convection. Cold air gets sucked into the smaller side hole, travels through the tunnel, hits the burning wood from below, and feeds it pure oxygen at the exact spot the combustion needs it most. That side hole acts like a bellows that never stops pumping. No batteries, no fan, no electricity. Just the natural difference in air pressure between a cold breeze at ground level and a column of hot air rising from a buried flame. And because the fire is below the surface of the earth, the soil itself becomes part of the furnace. The walls of the pit absorb heat during the burn and radiate it back inward, so the wood does not just burn, it bakes. Every stick gives up nearly twice as much usable energy because almost nothing is wasted to the wind. I measured it the next morning with a cheap infrared thermometer I had bought at a hardware store for about $32. The soil around Daniel's pit was still reading over 190 degrees Fahrenheit 8 hours after the last flame went out. My old above-ground pit at home, after the same kind of overnight burn, was stone cold by sunrise, and the ash was already wet with dew. That is the difference. That is the whole secret in one paragraph. But there is more, because the hole itself is only the beginning. Here is what nobody tells you about why this knowledge disappeared from the average American backyard. After World War II, the camping industry exploded. Companies started selling steel fire rings, prefabricated pits, propane fire tables, and glossy patio heaters. The advertising told you that a real fire was a tall, roaring, picture postcard blaze with sparks flying up into the night. The bigger the flame, the better the experience. That image sold magazines. It sold lighter fluid, it sold cords of wood by the truckload, but it was completely wrong from a heating standpoint, and the men who actually depended on fire for survival, the Amish, the old Mennonite farmers, the trappers in the upper Midwest, never bought into any of it. They knew the truth that the marketing departments buried. A tall flame is a flame that is escaping. Every inch of fire above your wood is heat leaving your body and going into the sky where it does you no good at all. The Amish learned this from their own ancestors who came over from the Palatinate region of Germany and from Switzerland in the 1700s. There is a household manual, sometimes called the Hausvater tradition, written for German-speaking farming families and dated to 1742, that explicitly describes the practice of sinking a cooking and heating fire below the level of the ground for efficiency in cold weather. The Amish brought that practice across the Atlantic with them, and unlike most early American settlers who drifted toward open hearths and tall chimneys, the plain communities held on to the buried fire principle for outdoor work, sugaring season, butchering days, and overnight camp watches in the woodlots. They refined it, they added the side draft tunnel, they learned which soils held heat best. They figured out that clay-heavy ground around eastern Pennsylvania and central Ohio actually outperformed sandy soil because the clay walls retained warmth for hours after the burn ended. None of this got written down in mainstream American homesteading books because the men writing those books in the 1800s were copying European aristocratic fireplace designs, not asking the farmers in Lancaster County how they kept warm during a January butchering. The knowledge stayed inside the plain communities, passed from grandfather to grandson in the kind of quiet workshop conversations that never make it into any archive. I only learned it because Daniel's father, a man in his 80s at the time, watched me struggling to light a wet fire one afternoon and finally said, with that gentle Amish patience, that I was working too hard for too little heat. He took the shovel out of my hand. 20 minutes later, we had a fire that lasted until the next morning. I stood there in his barnyard feeling like I had been robbed for 50 years. Every camping trip I had ever taken, every backyard fire I had ever built, every cord of wood I had wasted, all of it added up to a quiet theft committed by an industry that profited from my ignorance. Therefore, the next thing I did was learn exactly how to build it myself, and that is what I am going to walk you through right now, step by step, so that by the end of this video you can do it in your own yard before the sun goes down. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need to call a contractor. You do not need to file a permit. You do not need to spend $400 on a steel patio fire ring that throws most of its heat into the sky. You need a shovel, a patch of dirt at least 4 feet away from any structure, and about 45 minutes. Here is exactly how to build the Amish underground heat pit in your existing backyard. Find a flat spot of bare soil. If your yard is all grass, lift a small square of sod with the shovel and set it aside, because you can replace it later and nobody will ever know the pit was there. Dig your main hole about 12 inches across at the top and roughly 15 inches deep. Make the walls slightly tapered inward toward the bottom, almost like a small upside-down funnel, because that taper is what concentrates the heat upward toward your hands and face instead of letting it spread sideways into the soil. Now, about 10 inches away from the edge of that main hole, on the side facing into the prevailing wind, dig a second smaller hole about 6 inches across and 10 inches deep. This is your draft intake. Connect the 2 holes at the bottom with a tunnel just wide enough to pass your forearm through. That tunnel is the engine of the entire system. The cold incoming wind will hit the smaller hole, dive down, race through the tunnel, and slam into the base of your fire from underneath. That is what creates the doubled heat output. Once your 2 holes in the tunnel are dug, line the bottom of the main pit with 3 or 4 small flat stones if you can find them, river stones, field stones, anything that holds heat. Avoid limestone or anything porous because those rocks can crack or even pop in a hot fire. The Amish I watched in Holmes County used pieces of old broken brick from torn down chimneys, which works beautifully and costs nothing. Place your tinder, your kindling, and then 3 or 4 pieces of split hardwood directly on top of those stones. Light it from the top, not the bottom. Top-down ignition is another piece of the secret. When you light from the top, the fire burns slowly downward through the wood pile, the hot coals fall onto the heated stones, and the draft tunnel feeds oxygen exactly where it is needed. The wood lasts almost twice as long as a bottom-lit fire because it is being consumed in a controlled descent instead of an explosive rush. You will notice within about 15 minutes that your flame is short, blue at the base, almost silent, and putting out tremendous heat. There is almost no smoke because the oxygen feed is so efficient that nearly every particle of wood vapor is being burned cleanly inside the pit. Your eyes will not sting, your clothes will not reek. Your neighbors will not even know you have a fire going unless they look directly into your yard. And here is the part that matters for an existing homeowner with a regular suburban lot. You do not have to commit to anything permanent. After the fire dies and the ashes cool, you simply scoop them out, fill the holes back in with the dirt you set aside, drop the sod square back on top, and your yard looks exactly like it did before. The pit is invisible. You can build it again next weekend in a different spot if you want. There is no installation, there is no infrastructure, there is no inspector knocking on your door. It is the most low-impact, high-output heating method I have ever personally tested, and I tested it in 3 different states across 2 winters before I was satisfied it worked everywhere. But the hole in the ground is only half of it. The other half is what you put in it, and this is where every American camping book gets it backward. You have probably been told for your entire life that the best firewood is hard, dense, and well-seasoned oak or hickory. That is true for an indoor wood stove. But for an outdoor underground heat pit, the Amish do something completely different, and once you understand why, you will never go back. They mix their wood. Specifically, they layer denser hardwood at the bottom and place lighter, faster-burning wood like ash, beech, or even well-dried apple wood on top. The reason is simple physics, but I never heard a single American camping book mention it. The bottom of the pit, where the draft tunnel feeds oxygen, needs wood that will form a long-lasting bed of coals. Hard, dense oak does that perfectly. It glows red for hours. The top of the pit, where the flame initiates, needs wood that catches quickly and releases heat fast to get the system into a stable convection cycle. Lighter hardwoods do that job. When you stack them in this order and light from the top, the lighter wood ignites the heavier wood as it falls into the coal bed below. By the time the first hour passes, you have a deep, glowing core of hardwood coals in the bottom of the pit, radiating heat into the surrounding soil and the lining stones. That core can hold usable warmth for 6, 7, 8 hours even after the visible flame is gone. I have walked outside at 4 in the morning to a pit that had been dormant since 10 the night before and felt warmth still rising from the ground when I held my palm over the opening. The Amish farmers in Lancaster County use this exact method during late fall butchering days when they need a reliable outdoor heat source for hours of work in cold weather and cannot afford to be running back to the house for warm-ups. They taught me to think of the wood load not as fuel for a fire, but as a battery being charged. The hardwood at the bottom is the long-life cell. The lighter wood on top is the starter. The pit walls and stones are the storage medium. The draft tunnel is the regulator. When all 4 parts work together, you get sustained, even, radiant heat that simply does not exist in any above-ground fire I have ever built. There is also a second piece of wood wisdom the Amish carry that mainstream guides almost never mention. They do not waste their best hardwood on warm nights. They save oak and hickory for January and February, when the cold is deepest and the burn time matters most. In October and November, when temperatures are mild, they use softer woods and faster burns, because they do not need 8 hours of sustained heat. They need 2 or 3. This is resource discipline that comes from generations of families heating without electricity or gas, where every cord of wood represented hours of axe work. They do not burn their savings account in October. They spend small in fall, save the dense wood for the cold heart of winter, and as a result they often need only 60 to 70% of the firewood that an English neighbor on the same size property would burn through in the same season. I sat with one Amish family in Holmes County who heated their entire home, plus their outdoor cooking fires, plus their sugaring season operation on roughly 4 cords of wood per winter. The English family on the next road over was burning 7 cords in their open fireplace and still complaining about cold rooms. The difference was not the wood, it was the method. Therefore, even before you change a single thing about your house, you can change how you build your fire and how you stage your wood through the season, and you will see the difference in your wood pile by Christmas. Before I give you the part I promised at the very beginning, one quick thing. Everything I have been digging out of these old German manuals and these Amish barnyards, the underground draft pit you just learned how to build, the side tunnel that acts as a free bellows, the top-down ignition, the broken brick lining from a torn-down chimney, the layered wood load with hardwood at the bottom and lighter wood on top, the resource discipline of saving oak for January, the nightcap log I am about to walk you through, the breath line from the $8 fix video, the buried clay jar from the cooling trench video, the stube wall from the heating video, and all the other pieces I have pulled out of Lancaster County and Holmes County over the years. I have put it all in one place, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish Home System. Link is in the description. But stay right here, because what is written in old German script on the back pages of that 1742 Hausvater manual is the one modification that lets a single load of wood burn for 10 hours with nobody watching it. Here is the part I promised at the very beginning, and this is where everything comes together. During my third winter visiting plain communities, I was shown a small handwritten document kept inside a wooden box in an Amish family's attic in Lancaster County that traced back through 5 generations of the same family. The handwriting on the oldest pages was in old German script, the kind that is barely readable today even by scholars, and the date written on the inside of the front cover was 1742. The document was a household manual, a Hausvater book, brought across the Atlantic by a German-speaking farmer who settled in Berks County, Pennsylvania, in the middle of the 1700s. Most of it covered crop rotation, animal husbandry, food preservation, and remedies for common ailments. But 3 pages near the back described a specific outdoor fire method that the family had used continuously for 200 years. The technique combined the underground draft pit I have already described with one final modification that I had never seen written down anywhere in any mainstream American source. After the fire is built and burning steadily, you take a piece of green hardwood, ideally green hickory or green oak, no larger than your wrist, and you lay it across the very top of the pit, slightly off center, blocking about half of the opening. That is it. That is the missing piece. It sounds so small you might think I am making it up. But what that single piece of green wood does is transform the pit from a heating fire into a long burn radiant heater that can run for 10 to 12 hours on a single load. The green wood, because it contains moisture, does not catch fire immediately. Instead, it slowly bakes from below, releasing steam and slowly carbonizing on its underside. As it carbonizes, it forms a partial cap over the pit opening, which dramatically reduces the rate at which hot air escapes upward. The fire below cannot run away into open flame because the oxygen flow is now metered by the gap between the green log and the pit edge. The combustion slows down to an almost perfect smolder, the soil walls of the pit absorb and re-radiate the heat, and the green log itself eventually becomes part of the fuel load 8 or 9 hours later, after it has finished drying out from the heat below. The Amish family who showed me this called it the nightcap log in their dialect, and they said their grandfather and great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather had all done the same thing on cold nights when one person needed to stay warm in the barnyard during a calving or a sick animal watch. The technique is in that 1742 document in plain handwritten German, described as a method for keeping a fire alive through an entire winter night without tending. I tried it the very next week in my own backyard in a properly built underground pit. I lit the fire at 9 in the evening, placed the green log across the opening at about 10:30, and went inside. I came back out at 6 in the morning. There was still a glowing coal bed under the carbonized log. The soil around the pit was warm to the touch. A pot of water I had set on the edge of the stones the night before was still steaming. 9 hours of usable heat from a single load of wood in the open air with no tending, no electricity, no fan, no gadget, no fuel additive, just a hole, a tunnel, the right wood stacked in the right order, and a green log laid across the top at the right moment. That is the 200-year heat secret. That is what the Amish have known since before this country existed. That is what was sitting in a wooden box in an attic in Lancaster County while the rest of America spent billions of dollars on patio heaters, propane fire pits, and steel fire rings that throw most of their heat straight into the cold black sky. You did not lose this knowledge by accident. It was quietly pushed aside, generation after generation, while industries built fortunes selling you fire that escapes upward instead of fire that holds its ground. Tonight, you got it back. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been buried so somebody else could keep selling you the inferior version, you already know what to do next. Go out into your backyard this weekend. Dig the 2 holes, stack the wood the way I described, lay the green log across the top before you go to bed. Then come back and tell me one thing in the comments. What kind of soil did you build it in? Was it Pennsylvania clay? Was it Texas sand? Was it Michigan loam? Type the soil and the time the heat finally died. That is how we build a record the mainstream guides will never publish. If this changed how you think about something as simple as a backyard fire, ask yourself how many other things in your daily life are running on the wrong method because somebody profited from teaching you the inefficient version. Subscribing to this channel is not about supporting me. It is about joining a quiet movement of people who are recovering knowledge that was taken from us a long time ago, one technique at a time, one Amish farmhouse at a time, one buried document at a time. The next video I am working on covers the way the Amish keep an upstairs bedroom at a steady 72 degrees in February without a single duct, vent, or thermostat in the entire house. And I promise you that the trick involves something most American homeowners walk past every single day without ever realizing what it does. Stay close, keep the fire burning low and slow, and remember, the people who held on to this knowledge for 200 years did it on purpose, because they knew a day would come when the rest of us needed it back. That day is today.